He gets transported to a world where humans have gone extinct and becomes the most overpowered hero. Shin was an average high schooler who started playing the brand new VR MMORPG game called The Gate. This was the most advanced game of its time and took the world by storm. Players can explore the world as freely as they wanted to, select their own race and defeat powerful monsters together with their friends. This game was a dream come true for everyone, but one day, this popular game became a death trap, as the servers were jammed and people got stuck inside with no way of leaving the game. When a monster killed someone, that player died in real life as well, which created a huge wave of panic. But Shin was an experienced gamer who protected his fellow players from untimely death and made it his goal to finish the game so they all could return back to their normal lives. After several months, he finally leaves his home and his support characters to enter the final dungeon and face the final boss. The monster lunges forward with an attack, but Shin dodges and backs off before rushing forward and delivering a wild slash, cutting one of the wings off. He thought this would give him some advantage, but to his surprise, the boss simply regenerates his wings back alongside his HP. He realizes that he needs to finish this fight as soon as possible, so he rushes forward and clashes against the enemy before jumping up and delivering hundreds of strikes in quick succession, almost defeating the monster. Before the monster could recover though, he uses his special ability to upgrade his sword and jumps up in the air, striking the monster straight on the head, finishing it off forever. As soon as the monster disappears, the announcement is made inside the game about how the final boss has been defeated, which means that the game is officially over, and people are allowed to log off. He excitedly checks the log sheet to see that all of the players are slowly logging out and disappearing from the list. He makes sure that every single player left before finally he decides to log out. Before he could do that, however, a sudden noise makes him turn around, and he notices that a new gate has been opened behind him. The curiosity gets the better of him, and he decides to check where it leads before logging out. Suddenly, there was a huge bright light, and the next moment when he opens his eyes, he finds himself in the middle of nowhere in a grass field. All of this feels very realistic, but he checks his menu to realize he still must be in the game. He tries to log out, but notices that the log out button has disappeared once again. His heart sinks as he immediately checks the number of players in this game, only to realize that none of the players from the previous game have been transported here, and he is all alone. He curses his luck, but realizes that he needs to man up and figure this problem out. First, he uses his magic bird to take him to the location where his house used to be. To his utter surprise, the house that he built was still there, but suddenly he notices that a bunch of hoodlums seem to be harassing a girl. They ask the girl to tell them where the elf is, but when she refuses to give them the information, they grab her and start taking her out into the forest. The moment she exits the barrier around the house though, a massive monstrous pig appears in front of them, scaring the hooligans away, while she collapses on the ground waiting for her death. Thankfully, Shin slays the beast just as it was about to attack her and asks whether she is okay. She thanks him for saving her and takes him inside, where she asks what does he need. Shin is confused as this is supposed to be his home, but according to the girl, this home belongs to an elf named Rai. He suddenly realizes that Rai is none other than the pretty white-haired NPC character that he had in the last game. Apparently, she is very famous and owns this establishment. The girl introduces herself as Tiara and claims that she can relay his message to Rai for a small fee of 1,000 silver coins. Shin is confused as in the last game there were only gold coins, so he produces a gold coin, claiming that he only has this, but Tiara's jaw drops to the floor as apparently the gold coin is worth 10 million silver coins in this world. She asks who he is, and Shin replies that he belongs to the race of high humans. This shocks Tiara even more as high humans apparently went extinct 500 years ago. Shin realizes that the high humans must have been the players from his world who all logged out of the game after he defeated the final boss, which means that this world is 500 years in the future. He thanks her and hands her the gold coin for giving him this information. At first, Tiara gets shocked and tells him that she can't take it, but soon the gold digger inside her comes out and she accepts the coin and simply stares at it with disbelief. He asks her about the monstrous pig in this area, and she replies that she is cursed. According to her, she used to have silver hair, just like any other elf, but one day when she was a child, she got cursed by someone and her hair became black. Ever since that day, monsters have been attracted to her, and everyone hated her. Thankfully, Rai took her in and used a magical barrier to protect the house so that no monsters can attack them while inside. She claims that she will live her entire life inside the house, which is a pretty sad thing. So Shin uses his magic to check her stats and realizes that it is just a low-level curse that randomly happens. He tells her to relax and uses a purifying magic to nullify the curse. The magic seems to have worked, but her hair only partially changed to white. He decides to verify it and takes her outside the barrier, where she is scared at first, but soon gets relieved and overjoyed about the fact that now she can live her life normally. She starts crying and thanks him before they head back inside the house. There she hands him a blue envelope and tells him that this is a letter of introduction which will let him enter the city like a VIP. He thanks her and leaves the house to check out this new city and whether he can learn anything about how he can get back to his world. While near the gate, he realizes that he doesn't even have to get in line and enters the city without getting checked, and immediately heads for the Adventurers Guild to register himself. While he was eating, the guild master approaches him and takes him into the back room to verify the blue envelope. He checks whether it is a fake only to realize that the envelope is totally genuine, and then he tells Shin that this envelope is extremely important as with this, he can travel through any city without checking, stay at any guild, and can even have a personal meeting with the king himself. He tells him to make sure the card doesn't get stolen, and he promises to keep it safe. He attacks the monster, but it blocks before striking back, while Shin jumps up before backing off. He realizes that this monster is stronger than he thought, and seems to have a legendary weapon. He rushes at the monster and strikes again, but barely does any damage because his sword is almost broken. He knows he only has one more chance before the sword breaks, so he powers up like Goku and rushes at the demon, delivering a powerful slash that deletes the monster while the sword is thrown away far into the sky. He feels bad because he wanted that sword, especially now that his sword is broken, but simply takes the crystal is dropped as his reward and leaves the area for the time being. It turns out that the sword flew and ended up landing inside the chamber of the princess of this kingdom, who was beyond shocked to see this, while her guards wondered whether they were under attack. The princess tells them to calm down and realizes that the weapon is a legendary item, which is not a very usual thing to see. She tells the guards to get the weapon checked, and also find out who threw it inside the castle. Shin ends up returning to the city where he finds a large crowd gathered around the tattered remains of a bunch of soldiers. He asks around and finds out that the soldiers were wandering the northern forest after reports of people going missing, so they went to check, but ended up getting attacked by an incredibly strong monster that killed most of them while the rest ran away injured. The guard asks whether Shin knows anything about it, but he lies and claims that he doesn't know anything about it as he was picking herbs. After that, he returns back to the Adventurers Guild where he meets up with the receptionist named Silica. And even inside the guild, he finds out that everyone is talking about the northern forests, as apparently a lot of monsters have been spawning there lately. He turns towards her and reports that he ended up killing a giant monster called Skullface and wanted to have the gem that he dropped checked out. Silica is completely shocked while Shin continues about how the monster had a giant sword which ended up going missing, while his own sword ended up getting damaged during the scuffle. Silica gets in his face asking how can he talk so nonchalantly about something so crazy, but Shin replies that he just had a chance encounter and it was not his goal to fight the beast. Just then a green-haired elf named Elsa arrives who asks what the commotion is about. Silica goes near Elsa and whispers in her ears about how Shin ended up killing the legendary monster Skullface. Shin tells them that he doesn't have anything to prove that he killed Skullface though, as the items he dropped were too weak and basic, while the sword ended up getting lost. Elsa thinks that Shin must be lying about killing such a monster and asks Silica to get the gem checked. Silica tells Shin to wait out here while she has the gem checked, so he turns towards Elsa and asks whether monsters like Skullface spawn often here. She tells him that monsters are born from grudges and sins of people who die a horrible death, and because a lot of people ended up dying in the northern forest, it is now filled with corpses and a perfect location for the monsters to live. She tells him that usually the monsters there are pretty low level, so Skullface being there is a very big mystery. Shin very calmly tells them that he thought so as well, because he has never seen a Skullface that's level 359. This utterly shocks the two girls as they wonder where Shin is joking around or not. Elsa immediately tells Silica to check the level on the gem and turns around to Shin, telling him that if he is telling the truth, then that means that he is stronger than a full party of a rank adventurers. He tells her to keep it a secret for now, and she agrees, and after that she heads off to eat some food. While waiting for his food, a tall man wearing weird purple dress walks in, and everyone gets quiet around him, looking scared. The man comes up near Shin and puts his spear down, which Shin recognizes as a legendary item. The man sits down the other side and introduces himself as Will and asks whether he is new here. Shin replies that he came here a couple of days ago, and Will laughs about it, and claims that the only reason why Shin isn't scared of him is because he doesn't know him. He claims that he is known as the vampire around here because his spear has the ability to suck the soul out of any enemy that tries to cross his path. Shin doesn't really care about it and tells him to eat quietly as he has work to do. Later that evening he goes to a library to find out more about this world and reads a book, only to learn that this world is basically the same as the game he used to play. But the race of high humans have gone extinct, which means he is the last one in this world, which could be dangerous if bad people got to know about it. Meanwhile, the guild master calls a meeting where they discuss about the recent developments with Shin, as it turns out that he was telling the truth and the gem is indeed level 359. One of the royal guards asks the guild master to let him meet Shin, because this morning a huge sword flew into the princess's chamber, and they believe that Shin is connected to this occurrence and the sword might belong to the monster Skullface. On the other end, Shin is sitting near a fountain eating some snacks when he spots a small beast girl looking at his food with hungry eyes, so he offers her a bite and she happily takes it. While he was wondering whether the kid is lost, Will ends up walking up to them, as it turns out that Will takes care of some of the children that live in the church's orphanage, and this girl keeps running away when she gets bored. He tells her to get back to the church, but before going she goes near Shin and whispers in his ears that he should save the fox in the northern forest. Shin has no idea what she is talking about, but decides to check it out. The next morning he heads over to Tiara's place, where he asks her to relay a message to Rai. He tells her that he has been trying to send a mail directly, but he can't do it. Tiara looks confused and asks what is he talking about, so he tells her that he has magic cards that he can directly send to the person he wants. But they aren't working when he tries to send it to Rai. To demonstrate that the cards work otherwise, he goes outside the cottage and sends a mail to Tiara which shocks her, and she asks whether she could keep some. He happily gives her the cards and tells her to deliver the envelope to Rai alongside a sword that he produces. The sword supposedly belongs to Rai because in the game, he crafted it for her by using the items dropped by a lot of mythical monsters, and only she can use it. He tells Tiara to convey the message to her that if she remembers the sword and who made it, she should contact him. After that he heads off inside the forest to check what the beast girl was talking about, and suddenly the fog thickens as he arrives near a shrouded temple. He enters inside the mysterious-looking place and peeks inside the shrine only to see a small white fox lying in the middle of a magic circle. He walks up to her and checks the beast, only to find out that the fox has been cursed and poisoned. He immediately uses his ultra-strong purifying magic to heal her, and the fox returns back to consciousness. Suddenly, he feels that something is off and checks his map to see that he is being surrounded by enemies. He goes outside to find a truckload of zombified skeletons walking with swords in their hands intent on killing him. He tells the fox to stay tight while he takes a spear out of his magical pocket and in just 2 extremely powerful magical strikes, ends the lives of all of the monsters. After destroying the entire group without even breaking a sweat, he checks his map once again, thinking that all is clear when he spots that there are 2 more monsters nearby. It turns out that the statues near the gate were petrified monsters who finally break free and attack him. They are both level 675, which is insanely high, but he dodges their attacks and tries to use his Shadowbind magic to trap them. The monsters turn out to be pretty strong and release a thick fog like magical smoke that completely covers the entire area, blinding Shin and hurting the fox, while the beasts attack Shin from the darkness as he tries to dodge. He keeps dodging their attacks while trying to think of a way out of this problem when the fox directs him towards the magical circle inside the shrine. He immediately runs inside, and to his surprise, the smoke clears up and he is able to see clearly. Before they could attack, he uses his special legendary binding magic, and once they are trapped, he releases the full power of his spear, and in one devastating thrust, he completely destroys both the monsters from existence. Soon the smoke clears up, so he checks up on the fox once again, But to his utter surprise, the fox turns out to be level 211 monster called Elemental, which was the highest tier monster present inside the game. This was a really lucky break as he decides to keep the fox as his pet who could accompany him on his journey to find a way back home. He starts walking back, but realizes that considering how rare and unbelievably strong this elemental fox can be, it could become problematic as some people might attack him and try to steal her away. To make sure it doesn't happen, he decides to form a bond with the fox, in the process known as taming. After a beast has been tamed, only its owner can see the stats, and this way, everyone will think that she is just a normal fox. He turns towards the fox and asks whether she would want to be tamed by him, and to his surprise, the fox seems willing to do so as she trusts him after he saved her life. He begins the process, and after a while, the fox gets successfully tamed. He names his new party member Yuzu and heads back to the capital. He goes back to the guild where he meets up with the receptionists, who both want to take his report. He asks which one should he give the report to, and the sisters start bickering. He doesn't care about these things, so he walks over to the notice board, where he notices a weird quest. It seems to be put up directly by the church, and it doesn't disclose anything, only asking for a skill-holding adventurer to approach them. He finds it very fishy, but at the same time, he is also curious about it. He decides to take the notice and head over to the church, as this way he could meet Millie as well. He reaches the church where he meets up with a nun named Trya. She asks what is he doing here, and he honestly replies that he doesn't really know much about the church, but came here after checking the quest. The nun immediately gets interested and asks whether he is a skill holder. He tells her that he would reveal everything, but he would like to gather some information as well. He asks whether Millie the Beast Girl is around, and the nun seems suspicious, but takes him back to the guest room. He waits while wondering what powers does Millie possess, as she told him to save the fox before. Finally, the door opens and Millie enters the room, happy to see him. She immediately runs up to him and starts hugging him, which softens the nun a little bit, as she claims that now she knows that he is not a bad person, because Millie usually doesn't like company. He asks whether he can start the business talk now, and the nun gives him her permissions. He immediately looks at Millie and asks whether this is the fox that she was telling him to save. Millie takes a look at his head and happily claims that it is indeed the fox that she thought was in danger and thanks him for saving it. Shin smiles and tells Yuzu to thank Millie, as she is the one who asked him to save her life. Yuzu immediately comes down and thanks Millie, while Shin turns towards the nun and asks about the quest. She tells him that he must be a skill holder to be able to see the quest, which makes Shin realize that even though having certain skills were very common in his world, it must be a very rare thing in this new world. She tells him that they are looking for a particular skill holder who can teach one of the church's nuns that skill. He asks whether they want the heal or the curse skill, but the nun shakes her head and claims that due to certain circumstances, they really need to learn the purify skill. She looks down thinking that there is no way this guy knows the skill, but Shin simply replies that it is a hassle to learn that skill. She is shocked and asks whether he means that he knows the skill, and Shin replies that he does. She asks whether he would accept the quest, but he replies that he wants something in return for the job. She starts talking about gold and money, but he tells her that he is not interested in that and would like repayment in some other way. Just as the nun was going to break her vow of celibacy, Shin stops her and tells her that he simply wants to know details about the church and about the powers the Millie possesses. She looks unsure about it, and it makes sense, but Shin knows way too less about this world, and having the church as his informant would be very helpful. The nun was having trouble making the decision, but Millie speaks up and tells Trya that it is fine, and that she can trust Shin. Trya ends up taking the advice of a 6-year-old, and tells Shin that she can give him all the information about who comes and goes from the church alongside other details. She then tells him that Millie has the power of an oracle and can predict future sometimes. She has never been wrong in her predictions even once, and that's why they try to keep it a secret, because some evil men can try to take her away for their own benefit. To prevent that from happening, Will usually stays nearby, and because he is such a feared warrior, people stay away and don't mess with them. He then asks when would she like to learn the skill, but Trya replies that it is not her who is supposed to learn it, but the granddaughter of the previous priest because of some religious reasons. Later that day, Shin tries to mingle with the other children, but they all seem to be enchanted by the beautiful fox, while they completely ignore Shin and Millie. Shin doesn't know how to get closer to the kids, but Millie has had enough and wanted to pet Yusu, so she calls him over to Shin and then takes her in her arms, cuddling and petting the pretty beast. All the children watch in amazement and jealousy, but when Shin tries to talk to them, they run away. One of the older kids walk up to him and asks whether he is the one who is going to help them. Shin replies that he did take the quest and asks for more information about it. The little girl tells him that currently the church doesn't have a priest, so there are two candidates. The most promising candidate is a man who wants to destroy the orphanage completely and make his own house here. Shin asks why would he want to destroy the orphanage, and the kid replies that because they all hate this man, and he is also a money-grubbing pig. Shin asks why can't Trya become the priest, but the kid tells him that only a person with a purify skill can become a priest, and the other candidate is Rash, the late priest's granddaughter. She pleads with him to help them, and he tells them not to worry. Later that day, he meets up with Rash, who seems to be a nice girl, but pretty clumsy and careless. He introduces himself and claims that he will teach her the purification magic, but warns her that it will totally depend on how she practices and whether she is able to complete the training. He then asks whether they know any places where high-level monsters spawn, and Trya replies that there is a very well-known spot in the faraway forest. Before he can get any further information, the door opens and Will enters the door, with a scowl on his face, and asks why did he take the quest. He asks what he asks for in return, and Shin honestly tells him about his deal with Trya. Will thinks that they are trusting him a bit too much, as he is still a no-name new adventurer, but Millie insists that Shin is fine. Will still puts his lance on his throat and warns him that if any information about Millie's power get leaked, he will kill him with his own hands. Will then asks more about the purifying skill and how to learn it, so Shin explains that you first need to have a holy gem with you, which is very hard to find. After that you need to defeat over 200 undead monsters, and each should be at least level 150. The good thing is that only the killing blow matters, so his plan is to weaken the monsters to the brink of death, so that Rash can easily kill them off. Even Will is shocked at this because level 150 monsters are no joke. Shin, however, reassures them that he can do this, and insists that the harder part would have been to find a holy gem, but thanks to the power of plot armor, he already has the gem, so they can begin the process immediately. They decide to start the quest at night, and all of them go back to have some rest. While Shin was walking down to have some food, he gets ambushed by Will, who was waiting for him, and he takes him into a tavern for a talk. They have a deep bro talk, while Will explains that according to myths, every so often a person known as the Chosen One is born who has all the knowledge and memories from his previous life and is extremely strong. Shin wonders how this sounds similar to his reincarnation story, when suddenly he gets a message from Tiara, who claims that Rai replied and told Shin that she wants to meet him the moment she comes back from her job. After that, Shin takes out his letter of recommendation to flex on Will, but surprisingly even he has one. They touch tips together, which strengthens their bond even more, and a couple of hours later, head down to the dark forest. They walk for a while, after which they finally find their first wave of monsters. The dog monster attacks them, but Shin immediately freezes them in the air, and tells Rash to use her heal magic to kill them. She was unsure at first, but quickly deals with them. Will takes care of the next wave of skeletons with his lance, and Rash destroys them as well. After killing a bunch of waves, they finally head over to the deeper ends, where Will uses his adventurer's card to open a barrier which is put in place to stop new adventurers, as this area is dangerous. They enter the area, and immediately Shin notices some monsters on his minimap. Will goes ahead to deal with the ones ahead, while Shin weakens the ones nearby, and lets Rash end them. He tells her that by the time she learns to purify magic, she might become level 150 herself. Finally, Will comes back with a bunch of corpses and hands it over to Rash, who screams in horror at this sight. Meanwhile, much deeper in the forest, the princess and her party are dealing with a giant monster. She uses her giant sword to finish the demon and realizes that without this sword, which came through her window, killing this monster would have been very difficult. She then tells one of her party members to help the other group, so she runs over to the nearby lake. The other party seems to be on their last leg, barely managing to survive against the giant monster, but the white-haired lady enters the fray and uses her ultra-fast strikes to slice the monster in pieces and breaks its core in half. She lands on the ground, and her hair starts flying as the knight realizes that it's the famous white-haired elf, Rai. Rai uses a spell called Wide Heal to immediately heal all the injuries the knights have sustained. The knight captain kneels before her and thanks her, and she says that she wouldn't have been able to defeat the monster if they hadn't weakened it. With that, Rai takes off to investigate the nearby regions for more monsters and tells the knight captain to signal her if something comes up. She does the Naruto run through the forest, and the only thing on her mind is that she can soon meet her master again. Meanwhile, Will is facing one giant skeleton monster alone, and he manages to bring it down with just one hit from his spear. He tells Rash to finish the monster, and she casts the heal magic on the monster's broken core to defeat it. She suddenly starts glowing as the monster is defeated, and Shin says that it is just the special effect to tell her that she is eligible to learn a new skill. Rash seems spaced out and Will asks if she is fine. She explains that her mind was suddenly full of information about how to use a skill. Shin congratulates her and says that now they should quickly return to the city. Suddenly, Yuzu notices something, and as Shin looks around, his gaze also gets stuck on something. Will and Rash also look in the direction and find dark energy from all over the forest gathering in the sky. Will says that it is the magic matter that reanimates dead creatures into monsters. The dark sphere in the sky finishes absorbing the magic matter, and then it starts changing its shape while descending to the ground. It takes the form of a giant night monster, and Shin reads its status to find that it is a level 804 Skullface Lord. The monster suddenly leaps high into the sky and hits the barrier cast by the Adventurers Guild, shattering it along with Rash's hope to escape the place alive. The monster lands back on the ground and looks towards Shin and his group, and they instinctively know that they should run away. The giant monster roars and summons an army of skeleton monsters to surround them. Will panics and asks Shin to help him break through the monster horde so that they can escape, but he replies that he is going to stay here. Shin removes the limiter he had placed on his power, and Will is overwhelmed on seeing his true abilities. Shin declares that he can't let the monsters roam free and cause destruction, so he will stop them here. He asks Will to head back and take Rash and Yuzu with him, and casts a physical enhancement buff on him. Will tries to grab Yuzu, but she tightly latches on to Shin, refusing to let go of him. He understands her feelings and lets her stay with him. He then uses a powerful lightning spell to destroy all the skeletons in front of him and opens a safe passage for Will and Rash to run away. Shin then summons his sword and rushes towards the monsters. Yuzu uses a flame attack and takes down a large number of monsters at once, but the giant monster roars and calls more monsters to its aid. In response, Shin uses a powerful red thunder beam to annihilate the skeleton monsters, and the glow of his attack is witnessed by Rai, who flies towards his location. Shin notices that his attack took down many monsters, but his minimap is filled with red dots. He sighs, hoping that Rai could come to help him, and then he would be able to fight better. Just as he wishes that, a blue dot appears on the minimap, flying towards him and clearing all the monsters on the way. Shin figures out what it means and immediately runs away from the battlefield to arrive at a field of flowers. There, he finds Rai, and they look at each other dramatically with flower petals flying in the air. Shin asks her if she has been well, but then the skeleton monsters intrude on them. Yuzu jumps down and casts a barrier to give Shin some privacy, and he thanks her before turning to Rai. Before he can say anything, Rai hugs him tightly. Shin apologizes for abandoning her for so long, and thanks her for watching over the shop, but she grips him tightly to suggest that she doesn't want that. Shin is confused because he hasn't mastered the art of understanding women yet, but then he realizes what Rai truly wants. He tells her that he is back home, and she cries as she welcomes him. However, their touching moment comes to an end when Yuzu runs out of energy and her barrier disappears. The giant monster appears there, and Shin tells Rai that they should deal with it first before catching up on lost time. Both of them raise their hands and chant a spell called Sanctuary. A golden ball of light flies towards the sky and creates a radiant circle there. The light of the magic circle destroys all the monsters it touches, and Yuzu instantly gets all her lost energy back. Even the boss monster weakens after getting affected by the light, and Shin draws his sword to finish him. He jumps high and hits the monster with all his might, shattering its core. The skeleton monster falls, but before dying it tells Shin to give his power to him. Shin is shocked to see a monster speaking, and as it disappears, he picks up its core. After dealing with the monster, Shin tells Rai that since they are already here, they should talk things out while walking. They reach the ruins of an old building and Shin tells her what happened on the day he went to defeat the final boss of the game, and how he came here without his will. Rai also remembers that the dungeon suddenly disappeared, and so did the masters of other NPCs. She knew that Shin had cleared the game, but since she did not disappear, she believed that he was still in the game. Since that day, Rai and Shin's other NPC Servast have been looking for him all over the world. Shin then suddenly asks Rai to stop calling him master, because it would be chaotic if anyone heard a legend like her calling a seemingly normal guy her master. He asks her to call him by his name, and Rai blushes as she does that. Even Shin feels a bit weak in the knees on hearing her call his name. She then asks about his next step and Shin says that he is going to investigate a sacred site he read about in the library. Rai asks if he plans to return home, and when Shin affirms, she feels betrayed and sad. She knows that it was the expected answer, and accepts it without complaining. Shin changes the topic and asks how much does she remember from the game, and she replies that she remembers everything. She claims that after he cleared the game and all the players vanished, she became more aware of herself. She and the other NPCs were partially aware during the game too, but they were not fully conscious and could not take independent actions. They watch the sunrise, and after that they decide to return to their shop. However, before that, Rai wants to know about Yuzu. Shin tells her that Yuzu is his partner and an elemental, and Rai says that she knew that the fox was special just by looking at her tails, but could not guess that she was an elemental. Shin expresses surprise at this because he hadn't noticed anything. He lifts Yuzu up, and for the first time notices that she has 3 tails. If that wasn't enough of a surprise, Yuzu suddenly tells him good morning, and Shin freaks out. The fox reveals that her mind cleared after the large monster yesterday disappeared. Things make sense to Shin now, and he forbids Yuzu from talking in front of people, so she decides to talk to him through telepathy. Rai believes that her 3 tails will be a problem, but Yuzu can easily merge them into one to pretend to be a normal fox. Shin praises her, and as Yuzu basks in his praise, Rai finds her unbelievably cute. Shin understands her hesitation and lets her pet and cuddle with the fox, and Rai says that it is the first child elemental she is seeing because all others were adults. They decide to depart to the capital with that. Meanwhile, Will has been running all night while carrying Rash on his back, and she is worried about Shin. He tells her that Shin will be fine, and then suddenly, he feels something speeding towards them. He stops and turns around to face whatever is coming towards them, only to find that it was just Shin and Rai. Rash faints from a panic attack, and even Will is not happy that Shin gave them a jump scare. On the other hand, the princess and her guards come across the huge hole in the ground caused by Shin's attacks. The princess thinks that this hole in the ground is connected to the appearance of the magic circle in the air that destroyed all the skeleton monsters. She wonders who could have done that when one of her knights comes there with the sword Shin used to cast the earth-shattering skill. The knight shows the princess a falcon symbol on the hilt of the sword, and states that a very skilled swordsmith puts this symbol on the weapons he creates. He demonstrates that despite being damaged, the sword is powerful enough to split the ground with barely any effort from his side. The knight says that he has heard that there was only one blacksmith in the world who could forge swords this powerful. Legend has it that he was a high human and was called the Peerless Black Swordsmith. The princess remarks that there are no high humans left in the world, and the knight agrees. However, all he wanted to express was that the warrior behind the incident must be someone insanely strong and rich for treating a sword made by a high human like a disposable. The princess suddenly recalls that the Black Blacksmith was the original owner of the shop called Moon Sanctum that Rai operates. She plans to visit the shop once they reach the capital, and the knight asks her what she plans to do if the high human is really back. The princess laughs, saying that she would like to challenge him, and maybe get him to marry her. On the other hand, Will confronts Shin and asks him to reveal his secrets now. Shin tries to give Rai the credit for defeating the giant skeleton monster, but Will points his spear at him, asking him to stop lying. He begins stabbing at Shin, saying that it was obvious that he is the strongest person here because he was spamming powerful moves earlier, and he even caught up to them so quickly. Shin can only dodge his stabs as he asks him to stop. He finally comes clean and reveals that he is a high human, and also Rai's master. Will believes him easily, and then Shin asks him if there are any records about high humans in this world. Will tells him that there are many records that talk about how insanely strong and skilled high humans used to be, and they are still worshipped as gods by many people. Shin says that those stories can be a problem, but he really believes that his blacksmithing skills are legendary. Soon, Rash wakes up, and as she looks at Shin, she panics and asks if he is fine. She then notices the white-haired elf, and upon learning that she is Rai, Rash starts fangirling over her. The very next moment, she is hit by motion sickness because of being carried at super speed all night long. Will carries her on his back again while Shin apologizes for it. They plan to go their separate ways once they reach the gate, and Shin gives Will some of his magical letters to contact him immediately if something happens. Will warns him that if he uses these letters, he would be in a very serious situation, and tells Shin to rethink it. Shin realizes that Will doesn't want to involve outsiders in his problems, but he pushes the letters on him, remarking that he can't leave him alone after they have come together all this way. Will decides to take up the letters and then leaves for the church. Shin and Rai also head back to their shop, where Tiara comes running to greet Rai. She nervously explains to her about the man who came to their shop, claiming to be Rai's friend, without noticing that the man in question is standing right there. After Rai helps her calm down, Tiara notices Shin, who says that they should have dinner before talking about their circumstances. Tiara asks why should she let him eat dinner with them, and then Rai decides to introduce Shin as the true owner of their shop. Tiara freaks out on hearing this, but she cannot argue with Rai's judgment. She apologizes to Shin for not recognizing him earlier, and he tells her to not be so serious. He also introduces Yuzu to Tiara on the same note, and she is shocked to see a talking fox. Soon, Rai prepares a full-course meal for Shin, and Tiara is surprised about the ingredients because the food seems to be covered in a faint aura. Shin says that the meat in the dishes is from strong monsters like Thermal Lion and Orc King, and even the vegetables are some rare items. Tiara once again freaks out on hearing the name of all rare and legendary class ingredients, but Shin ignores her concerns and asks Rai about aura. She replies that aura is the remnant of mana in the ingredients, and it is often seen with powerful monsters and rare plants. They begin dinner with that and truly relish everything. Later, Rai tells Shin that all the other NPCs are living their lives separately. They initially thought about searching for him, but then decided that he would be fine no matter where he was, so they just decided to wait patiently for him. Shin appears a bit melancholy on hearing this, and then suddenly, the drunk Tiara starts telling him that he is too serious. Rai takes her to bed, while Shin also heads to his bedroom that has not changed at all ever since he left it. Yuzu has already fallen asleep, and Shin also changes into comfortable clothes to go to sleep. He feels drowsy the moment he plops on the bed, and wakes up in the middle of the night, feeling a heavy weight on his chest. As he opens his eyes and looks around, he finds Rai sleeping next to him. Shin panics on seeing her so close and his heart starts pounding uncontrollably. He gently touches her face, and Rai starts crying while calling out his name. He can only wipe her tears and apologize to her in his mind. When morning comes, Shin finds that Rai is no longer sleeping next to him, but then he notices some unfamiliar white hair next to him. He lifts his blanket to see what is happening and finds that Yuzu has turned into a human. As she gets up lazily, Shin freaks out on seeing her bare body, and as she rushes to hug him, he fears that the FBI may come for him. He then gives her some clothes suitable for elementals to wear. Later, they head to the kitchen to meet Rai and Tiara, who are surprised to see Yuzu in her human form. She nervously greets them, and then all of them have breakfast. After that, Shin asks Yuzu about the shrine she was at, and the symbol drawn on the floor. She doesn't know anything apart from the fact that she felt less uncomfortable within the symbol as compared to any other place, and Shin begins to inspect her answer for any clues. He then asks Yuzu what was she doing there, and she replies that she was just napping in the sun, when suddenly, a natural disaster shook the place and she tried her best to stop it. She got exhausted by expending all her power, and then went into the shrine to rest. When she thought that she was going to die, Shin came there and rescued her. Shin says that he could only save her thanks to Millie, and Yuzu wants to thank her with a gift. Rai suggests that they take an elven bread made by Tiara as their gift, because it is the top product of their shop. Shin remarks that they are a weapon shop and not a restaurant, but Rai reminds him that he is the only one who can open the armory, so they couldn't restock it in his absence. Shin understands and decides to immediately put the shop back on track. Rai then tells him that there is something more urgent than the shop, and it is about another NPC named Gerard. Shin is shocked to learn that Gerard is still alive, because he is a high beast who can live only up to 150 years. Rai replies that he may not have much longer to live, and he is still waiting for him to come back. Rai then explains that Gerard was the one who united various beast tribes and formed the Farnid Beast Alliance and became its first king. She explains that currently, the alliance is ruled by the 8th king, so Gerard can wait for him. Shin confirms that Gerard is not in any immediate danger, and then decides to travel normally to meet him. Rai and Yuzu are obviously going to come with him, and Tiara says that she will mind the shop. However, Rai tells her that she doesn't need to stay behind, because now that Shin is here, he can carry the shop with him. The elf girl doesn't understand, but Shin asks her to travel with him now that she is finally free from her curse. She gladly agrees, and Shin says that they should start preparing for their journey now. He thinks about the food and equipment they need to buy, and Rai remarks that she must report about the Skullfaces to the Empire as well, so she will need to act independently for some time. Shin has no problem with that, and he plans to level up as an adventurer on the way to Farnid. Rai tells him to form a party with her, because then they can always communicate with each other using telepathy. Shin is surprised to learn about this feature and adds Rai to her party, and then suggests Tiara to also register as an adventurer. Before that, Shin heads to his forge and tells the excited Yuzu to not touch anything because some weapons may be cursed. Since everything is in working condition, he makes some swords, but the first sword turns out to be too good for this world. Shin knows that he can't sell something like this, so he decides to try less harder in the following attempts. He succeeds in making some fine swords to sell at his shop, and then Tiara comes there, ready to go out. They exit the forest and enter the market, which completely takes Tiara by surprise, as she has never seen so many people collected in one place. She asks Shin whether this place is usually this crowded, and Shin replies that the rush hours haven't even started yet. Every single thing in the market makes her curious, as she hasn't been out for 100 years at this point. She excitedly tells Shin that they should go to the guild quickly and get her registered. Shin takes her to the guild where they meet the receptionist, who immediately tells Shin that he has been ranked up to E. Shin is confused because he hasn't even completed a single quest yet. But the receptionist replies that his exploits are well known at this point, as he defeated the giant skeleton monster before and then was spotted defeating a huge horde of skeletons. She claims that he should be ranked up to it at once, but if they do it, it will create a lot of turmoil as the other adventurers won't like it. He claims that he doesn't mind that when suddenly the receptionist's face changes as she asks who the hell is with him as she looks at Tiara with jealous eyes. She claims that they were seen holding hands and asks whether he is in love with her. Both Tiara and Shin get embarrassed as he claims that there is nothing like that. He then tells her that he is planning to go to the place called Farid and inquires whether there are any quests to be done on the way. The receptionist immediately takes out a huge register and flips through the pages and claims that there is indeed one quest, which is to escort a carriage to Farid, and asks whether he would like to take it. He immediately accepts it, and they both head out to explore the market a little bit. This basically becomes a date more or less as they walk through the markets, looking at all the different things being sold in the area. Shin then asks her whether she wants to check the church out, and Tiara agrees, so they head towards the church where they spot Rash involved in child labor as she cleans the ground. She immediately runs over to Shin and greets him warmly before asking who the girl is. Shin explains that her name is Tiara and she works at the Moon Sanctum. This really shocks the girl, who runs over to Tiara and asks whether she knows Rai or not. Tiara explains that Rai is her master, which makes Rash's eyes gleam with excitement as she asks her all about how Rai is as a master and a person. Sometime later, they enter the church where Millie immediately starts playing with Yuzu and thanks him for coming here. Meanwhile, Rash thanks him for helping her the other day, as because of that, she has been appointed as the next priest of the church and everyone is happy. Shin asks where Will is, as he has not seen him around. They reply that Will has gone out to investigate the other priest candidate, as he suspects that there is something going on which might cause problems for the church. Shin then produces some magical charms that he created with his magic infused in it and asks them to keep it near them. Suddenly, the door opens and the other kids enter the room, immediately swarming Shin as they all want to meet with him. Tiara is also not left alone as she gets kids all around her and doesn't even know how to deal with them. Sometime later, they exit the church as Rash thanks them for meeting up with them and promises to protect the church as much as she can. They bid farewell and head back to the guild where the receptionist was ready with Tiara's adventurer's card. They take it and head out once again as a successful day starts coming to end. He takes Tiara into a dark alleyway out of eyesight and produces a beautiful crystal, claiming that they can straight up teleport with this crystal. Tiara is beyond shocked at this and asks what is he even talking about. Shin claims that it's just normal teleportation magic, while Tiara tells him that teleportation itself is a completely lost magic that hasn't been performed in ages. He tells her to get used to it as they start teleporting and immediately arrive in front of the moon sanctum. She is still a bit shaken up by the teleportation when Shin quickly transforms the moon sanctum into a portable form as a necklace, claiming that now they can take it wherever they want. A little while later, they head out of the city gates and find a carriage alongside a weird alligator guy standing in front of it. It turns out that the alligator guy's name is Guy, and alongside a girl called Baki, they have also taken the same quest to escort the carriage. Soon enough, the owner named Nak comes and greets them warmly, and soon they start traveling through the forests in silence. While traveling, they end up making small talk as Guy asks them whether they have killed any men before. This surprises Tiara, who looks at Shin, and he tells her that usually these escort missions have to deal with bandits who are human and not monsters. The redhead claims that no one takes her seriously because of her size and her gender, but she has beaten the crap out of a good many guys. They introduce their classes, and it turns out that Guy is a samurai class, a rank just like Shin, while Baki is a brawler and rank E. Shin realizes that Guy must be sufficiently strong to be rank O, and feels a little better about the mission when suddenly the carriage stops. They get out to find themselves surrounded by bandits looking at them. Shin tells Nak to head back inside the carriage and tells Yuzu to protect him. The bandits seem to have a lot of confidence as they start making fun of them and passing comments on the redhead, who seems unfazed by it. Tiara is hiding behind the carriage all this while thinking whether she could ever kill a human when she suddenly realizes that Shin seems different as he is seething with anger at the comments passed by these men. Suddenly she notices a couple of other men hiding behind the trees to ambush them. Guy tells them to back off as he doesn't want to kill unnecessarily, but the leader is confident and knows that he is the only a rank adventurer, while the rest are rank E and lower. Shin realizes that they must have some inside information as this is not a random attack, but before the bandits attack, an arrow goes past one of them and then another arrow flies, killing both of the hidden men. The leader is surprised that they got found, but the fight resumes. One of the guys runs at the redhead, who simply ducks below and delivers a massive uppercut that knocks the guy out, which scares them. Guy immediately follows up as he slices through both the guy and his sword with surprising ease. Two guys try to attack Shin together, but he easily cuts through them without any issue before walking towards the leader. The leader is still confused as these rank E adventurers should not be this strong, but Shin immediately cuts through his sword and beats the crap out of him before tying him up. He puts his sword at his throat and asks who the hell told him about them when Tiara grabs Shin from behind and puts him between her massive plots, which calms him down a bit and his deadly intent goes away. Shin is completely surprised at this, while Tiara gets embarrassed thinking that she just did it because Rai does it to calm her down. Meanwhile, Shin is looking at her confused before he decides what to do with this bandit leader. They decide to move forward and sat inside the carriage happy that everything went according to the plan and neither the carriage nor the owner got injured. Guy tells Shin that he was able to extract some info from the bandits, and according to him, they were appointed by some mysterious group of people who told them to capture the carriage as they wanted an item connected to the church. This all is very weird as usually bandits are only after money. But Guy explains that the bandits themselves had no idea what that item is, so their plan was to simply capture the entire carriage and take it with them. Suddenly Shin remembers how while in the church, the sister told him that some of the senior officials of the church are very corrupt and power-hungry and wonders whether this is their work. Despite whatever the reason was, he is simply happy that he ended up taking this quest, which was purely a coincidence, but now he might be able to dig deeper in this issue with the church. Finally, they reach the city and the quest ends as the Short King hands them their scrolls, which can be given to the guild as the proof of completing their quest so that they can get their money back. They thank Nak for the quest and Nak thanks them for helping him arrive safely in the city, as if it was not for the four of them, he would have probably died at the hands of those bandits. After Nak leaves, Shin asks Guy and Baki what their plans are, and Guy replies that they will be heading back to their own city immediately, while Shin replies that he needs to go ahead to the city of Farnid from here. Guy bids them good luck and hopes that their paths meet again before leaving with Baki, while Shin and Tiara move ahead in their own path. He asks Tiara how she liked the trip in the carriage, as he wonders how to move forward from here as Farned is still a long way off. She claims that the carriage was pretty comfortable, and he agrees. Soon he decides that they should simply buy a carriage, as that would be the most efficient and comfortable way to reach Farned. They both enter a huge area, lined with tons of carriage which all look the same to Shin, so he starts scheming about how he will modify them completely. But Tiara tells him to go easy as they need to buy one first. She asks what kind of carriage is he looking for, and he claims that he is trying to find a carriage big enough to sleep and to carry all their stuff with them. He plans to modify the carriage anyways, as he doesn't like how unstable and shaky they are. Tiara also believes that it would be a great relief to not get carsick in the carriage, and they start looking for one. Finally, Tiara spots a fancy-looking carriage with flowers and shit, and she directs Shin's attention towards it, claiming that it's pretty, but also big enough that they can all travel together alongside Rai if they want to. The dealer walks up to them and asks whether anything interests them, and Shin immediately tells him that he wants to buy that fruity carriage and tells him that he needs it ready by tomorrow. The dealer smiles and asks whether he has gotten horses to pull the carriage, but Shin replies that he hasn't gone through with it yet. The dealer looks at him and advises him to get 2 big horses with strong feet, as the carriage is pretty heavy and cannot be pulled by a weak-ass horse. Shin thinks about how expensive that would be and asks the dealer about the carriages pulled by monsters that he has seen a couple of times. The dealer replies that monsters are much stronger and faster than horses, so one of them would be enough to pull this carriage. But to do that, he will have to tame a monster first, which is incredibly difficult. He tells him not to worry about it and get the carriage ready as he leaves alongside Tiara, wondering where he can find a monster, but thinks that bottom line, he can simply use Yuzu as the monster to pull his carriage. Suddenly, he gets a notification from Rai, who tells him that her work inside the kingdom has been completed and asks what's up with them. Shin replies that they are in the city of Bay right now, and just bought a carriage for further travels to Farned. He claims that they still need a monster to pull it, but Rai tells him not to worry about it, as she will get the monster for them. She tells Shin to wait till tomorrow, as she is hurrying over to Bay to join them, but it will take her at least one day. He tells her not to worry about it and come at her own pace. Rai also discloses to him that the kingdom was in a state of uproar, as they found out that the Moon Sanctum has been disappeared. Shin never thought it would have such a huge effect on the royals, but Rai claims that they were trying to flatter her and talk sweetly so that she joins the royal army, but she refused and left. Shin claims that it must be hard for her constantly dealing with people who want to use her power, while Rai claims that one time a country tried to claim the Moon Sanctum for themselves, and she was very close to completely destroying that country at that time. Shin tells her to chill out and meet them tomorrow and cuts the call, while Tiara calls him over to a bong shop as she liked one of the bongs. Shin is against drugs, so he tells her to shut up as he asks the old stoner lady about any decent places to stay, and she immediately recommends them a place that she swears by. They reach the location only to find a huge hotel in front of them that looks ludicrously expensive. They enter inside nonetheless and ask the receptionist whether they have any rooms available. The receptionist immediately asks whether they will need a couple's room, but they get embarrassed and decline immediately, claiming that they will take 2 single rooms. Seems like they have more integrity than my ex-girlfriend. Shin opens his room to find a beautiful chamber filled with decorated furniture and a beautiful bed. He closes the door while Yuzu hops onto the bed and converts into her lowly form. She asks whether she can talk now, and Shin gives her the go-ahead. Later he realizes that there is still some time for dinner, so he decides to maintain his weapons till that time while Yuzu plays around. A little while later, as he was finishing up his maintenance, Tiara knocks at his door and walks in, asking when will Rai be arriving. Shin answers that she should arrive tomorrow, but he doesn't really have the exact timings when she will come. Tiara claims that if they don't have anything to do, then they should simply relax, and he agrees and calls room service with dinner. After dinner, he tells them that he is going to take a warm bath and then hit the sack, to which Tiara replies that she will do the same. Yuzu immediately asks whether they can take a bath together, and she agrees, but instead of going into her room, Yuzu ends up dragging her into Shin's bathroom, where they start taking a shower. Shin walks up to the window and starts looking out the window, wondering about tomorrow, while Rai was outside in the forest and finally found a monster worthy to be her mount. The next morning, Shin wakes up with Yuzu on his face, and he walks outside to meet with Tiara. After checking on the carriage, he starts modifying the axle and adds some suspension to it, which surprises both Yuzu and Tiara. Soon he gets a notification from Rai, who tells him that she is outside in the forest and tells him to meet her there. He takes Tiara and starts walking through the forest when both he and Yuzu feel a strong presence nearby. They come out into the clearing and are shocked to see Rai with a huge demonic beast standing by her. This demonic divine wolf has a level of over 750, so he asks where did she find it. Rai nonchalantly explains that she found him in the sacred mountain where the most dangerous beasts live. He tells her that this beast is too big for the carriage and might draw unwanted attention. But Rai planned for that and tells the beast to shrink in size, which it does to become a little bigger than a horse. Soon the monster starts hitching their wagon along at a very high speed, which seems to excite Shin, while Tiara comments about how comfortable the carriage is after the modification. Rai agrees with it, claiming that she has been on the royal carriage multiple times, but this carriage is somehow much better than that. While they were traveling, Yuzu starts talking to the beast in their language and explains that he used to live in the sacred mountains alongside his mother. But one day an adventurer killed her and he was left alone, injured and afraid. Just when he was about to give up, a very kind elf girl saved him and gave him the strength to train and become stronger. He surprises everyone after that by revealing that the elf girl is none other than Tiara, as he recognizes her smell. Tiara at first doesn't remember, but suddenly realizes that 100 years ago she did save a small puppy once and nursed it back to health. Rai finds this story so heartwarming that she decides to transfer the ownership to her. They get of the carriage and Rai touches the beast and revokes her ownership, making him a free divine monster once again. After that, Tiara moves ahead, scared at first, but then manages to tame it and names it Shimmer. That night everyone sleeps while Rai tells Shin that now Tiara can choose her own path if she wants and they can rest easy, knowing that Shimmer will protect her. The next day they start traveling through a very lush forest when the carriage stops as two people walk towards them. They ask whether they are Rai and Shin and starts taking them to Gerard, who became the first beast king of the area. His village seems to be beautiful and prospering as they enter it, and once inside his house, they are escorted to a room. They enter the room only to find two beastmen sitting beside their old fellow Gerard, who looks at them happily and tells Shin that he never saw he will see him again. Shin tells Gerard that he had also not thought of seeing him again, and the old guy just laughs it off. He says that the reason he is still alive after all this time has remained a mystery to him too. After that, Gerard decides to introduce the beastmen in the room. First is Wolf, the current king of Farnid, and his daughter Kor. The elephant dude is Van, Gerard's right-hand man, and the turtle-like guy is Rajim, his left hand. Shin introduces himself too, and Gerard tells him to stop being so formal and speak normally. Shin asks him to start speaking normally first because Gerard never used to call him master in the past. The old man just laughs it off and decides to obey Shin, because that is the only way he can ease the tension in the minds of other people in the room. Shin doesn't quite understand him, and Gerard explains that to the people of this world, high humans like him are legendary beings who must be feared and worshipped. Soon after that, Gerard and Shin start talking about the old times when they used to fight huge hordes of monsters by themselves. They laugh about how reckless they used to be back then. Gerard wants to tell Shin what happened in the 500 years he was missing, and he replies that Rai already told him about Gerard founding the nation of Beastmen. He is not happy with that, because he was planning on boasting about his achievements to Shin. Rai says that she knew he would exaggerate things, so she told their master about the things objectively. Shin simply laughs about it, and then Rai leaves to brew some tea. In the meantime, Gerard asks Shin to tell him more about where he was in the 500 years, and he tells him whatever he can remember. They keep chatting till evening, and then suddenly, Gerard gets serious. He tells Shin that it is time to get down to business. Gerard reveals that he doesn't have long to live, and Shin is taken aback by the suddenness of the news. Gerard believes that he only has about a month left, and Shin asks how can he be so sure. He says that for the past few weeks, he had been feeling odd, and then he learnt about Shin's return from Rai. That was when all his doubts were solved, and he realized that since his master was back, time started flowing normally for him again. Gerard believes that it was almost as if he was waiting just for Shin to return so that he could die in peace. He says that maybe the gods of this world have heard his prayer. He then faces Shin and asks him for a duel, saying that it is his last wish. Shin wonders if Gerard wants to die in a battle like a proper warrior. Gerard wants to see how he compares against a legendary high human that he once fought besides. Seeing the determination in his eyes, Shin accepts Gerard's request. Rai also hears this, and she is not happy about it, so she simply walks away. Shin then asks him if he has any regrets left, and Gerard says that the only regret is that they have not dueled, and that will also be erased soon. At night, Gerard calls the important beastmen to his room for an important announcement. He tells them that he has found his place to die. He explains that he has asked Shin to duel him before his time is up, and the duel will take place 1 week from now. Wolf and his daughter are surprised, but the elephant and the turtle were already anticipating this because they have known Gerard for the longest time. Wolf's daughter Cor finds it hard to accept, and she gets up and asks everyone how are they so calm while talking about death. Gerard simply tells her that he has lived a long life and seen generations after generations of his friends and their families die. He says that the reason that he has lived for so long will be evident to everyone on the day of the duel, and tells Cor that she will also have to see it. She accepts his wishes, and then Gerard declares that the duel will take place in the Ralua forest, and everyone should be there to witness the greatest fight of his life. Later, Gerard looks at the moon and thinks about how when Shin disappeared, the world turned bland. He regretted not being able to fight against him, and thought that his wish would never come true. Now that it is on the verge of becoming reality, Gerard can only thank Shin for returning. From the next day, Shin follows a peaceful routine, sleeping in late, having meals with his friends, and examining some magic gauntlets. He makes his shop magically appear, much to the surprise of the beastmen, and then repairs the gauntlets with just one tap of his hammer. At night, he returns those gauntlets to Gerard, saying that he can fight his heart out now. Gerard thanks him, and then they begin chatting again. The day of their fated duel is tomorrow, and they have one last heart-to-heart before that. Gerard wants to give Shin some advice, but he hesitates saying it out loud. Shin has already figured out that it is about Rai, and Gerard tells him that he is right. He wants to know if Shin will really go to his world if he finds a way, and leave her behind. Shin thinks about his memories with Rai and then says that he will go home because that is what he has been fighting for. Gerard is a bit pained on hearing that, and says that he should not have asked such a personal question. Shin lays down and wishes there was a magic solution that could get rid of his and Rai's problems at once. They talk about how not everyone can get their happy ending, and then Gerard lays down too, telling Shin that he is looking forward to tomorrow. The next day, they head to the location of the duel. Shin asks Rai to deal with any stray attack that comes towards their direction, and she tells him to leave everything to her and fight to his heart's content. She watches Gerard saying his goodbyes too, and asks Shin to take care of him. Everyone wishes him good luck, and on the other hand, Gerard also receives the best wishes of his followers. With that, both the warriors jump off the cliff. The elephant and the turtle talk about how they have not seen Gerard so happy in a long time, and even Wolf tells his daughter to witness the dream of their first king come true. Deep inside the forest, Shin and Gerard are ready to fight. They take their stance and let out a battle cry before starting the fight. Those at the cliff can only see some distant explosions as Shin and Gerard crush the ground under their feet by clashing with each other. They keep running through the forest, creating explosions everywhere they go. Shin sends a flying slash toward Gerard, who easily dodges it mid-air, and then hits him with a heavy blow. Shin blocks it with his sword, and both of them smile at each other. The spectators are in awe at this, and Wolf says that he never knew that Gerard was so powerful. However, the old-timers and Rai know that this is just warm-up for both of them. Tiara is surprised to learn that this is not their real strength, and asks Rai if she is also as strong as them. She replies that even she would struggle against Gerard. Back in the forest, Gerard tells Shin that the techniques that he developed specially to fight him are proving useless now. Shin tells him to stop holding back and show his true power, and Gerard obliges. He unleashes his full power and transforms into a big white wolf. Gerard recalls that yesternight, Shin told him that he fight with all his power, but he will not use the titles he got from defeating the last boss of the game, as that would be unfair. Gerard thinks that if he was in Shin's place, he would have done the same too, but still, he wants to fight him when he is at full power. He tells Shin to be ready to face him, and he replies by sending a red thunderbolt in his direction. Gerard vanishes just as the thunderbolt is about to reach him, and surprises Shin by appearing behind him. He attacks him, but Shin still blocks his surprise attack and asks him if this is all he has prepared for this fight. They separate, and then Gerard decides to unleash his ultimate technique. He gathers the energy around him into his fist, and then releases it as a punch. Shin decides to take the attack head-on and blocks it with his sword instead of dodging it. The majestic ultimate attack pushes him through the forest, but that is not all. Gerard suddenly appears behind him and begins launching high-level martial arts techniques. Shin can only dodge the attacks, and he realizes that Gerard must have trained incredibly hard to chain the various skills he could use only one at a time earlier. He keeps getting pushed, and then Gerard blows him to the sky with a powerful skill. Shin feels guilty of holding back when Gerard is putting his everything on the line in this battle. He releases his energy and starts coating his sword with a red aura. He lifts the sword up and charges it for his ultimate attack, and that is exactly what Gerard wants. He also charges up his ultimate attack, and both of them shoot it out at the same time. Their attacks collide mid-air, creating a giant energy sphere where the opposing forces of the attacks try getting overwhelming the other. Shin and Gerard also clash with each other, and as a result of the high-intensity attacks, their weapons are destroyed. In the very next moment, Gerard appears behind Shin and launches a surprise attack on him. Shin realizes it will be dangerous, but Gerard is unable to punch him. His fist gently taps Shin's stomach, and then he begins stumbling backwards. He falls down and rests against a boulder, and then suddenly starts coughing blood, causing Shin to worry about him. Gerard's transformation comes undone, and he smiles, saying that it seems to be the end for him. Shin says that he is impressed because he got him with that last move. Gerard laughs, saying that he hasn't lived for 500 years for nothing. He is pleased that he was able to land a blow on his master, and then asks Shin if he can do something for him as a reward. Gerard knows that Shin was still hiding some of his strength, and he wants to witness it. Shin is taken aback by his words, but he still decides to fulfill his wish. He jumps back and then releases an insane amount of energy that rattles the entire forest. As Gerard witnesses the explosion of energy, he remarks that he had no idea about Shin's true power. He wishes him farewell, and Shin only tells him that they will see each other later. Shin expands his energy, and Gerard closes his eyes as he is consumed and defeated by it. Soon, Shin returns to the cliff with the unconscious Gerard on his back. Wolf and other beastmen rush to look after him, but Shin tells them to not look so sad. He reveals that Gerard managed to land a hit on a high human, and that means he is on the same level as one now. The two old-timers tell the crying girl to look at Gerard's smiling face, and say that he died without a regret. She wipes the tears off her face, saying that Gerard would laugh if he saw them like this. Shin, however, has his back towards everyone, because he cannot face them with his emotions overflowing. Soon, Gerard's funeral is held, and it starts raining. The citizens of the forest mourn him as his coffin is carried to their traditional resting place. Wolf and others transform and howl to pay their first king their last wishes, and Shin watches everything alone from a distance. At night, Rai finds him staring at the moon, and runs to embrace him after sensing the sadness he is holding within his heart. She asks him what can she do to ease his burden, and he begins crying in her embrace, saying that even though this is what Gerard wanted, it is too sad to lose a friend. A few days later, Shin, Rai and Tiara explore the market. Rai and Tiara are wearing some catgirl ears that hide their elf ears, which would otherwise attract a lot of attention. Rai says that these will help them mingle nicely with people here, and recalls that Shin used to call them cosplay items. He gets nervous at this, because he was the one who created them in the first place, but didn't know that he would get two cosplayers in his group. Rai blushes as she asks Shin how does she look in these ears, and he says that she looks like a furry waifu, causing her to blush even harder. She walks away to meet someone, which is another one of the NPC characters Shin had created. He met the Dragonoid character Suede during Gerard's funeral by chance, and they are catching up today. They enter a prestigious hotel where the dignitaries from various nations who came to Gerard's funeral are staying. Shin asks Rai if Suede is also a monarch like Gerard, and she explains that though he was the first emperor of the Dragon Empire Kilmont, he has cut his ties with the imperial family now. Right now, Suede lives freely as the current Dragon Emperor is a very capable person. They come to Suede's quarters, where his butler asks Shin and others to wait in the waiting room while he calls his master. Wolf tells Shin that he will only escort him till here because he is busy, and leaves his daughter Quor with him. Shin and the girls are in the living room. When Suede comes there, he has an air of vanity around him, and he quickly dismisses his servant. Shin greets him, and then suddenly Suede falls to his knees, expressing his delight on seeing that his master has finally returned. He swears to serve Shin again, who realizes that Suede's character was like this. He gets embarrassed and says that they should take it easy because they are meeting after so long. Suede is not sure about that, but when Rai tells him that it is okay, he decides to accept his master's command. He gets up and says that he will also be relaxed around Shin from now on. But first, he asks Rai why is she wearing the cat ears and tail. She replies that it is to suit Shin's taste, and he requests her to not give him the wrong idea. They sit down to talk after that, and discuss how Gerard died like a proud warrior. After that, Suede asks him does he plan to do now, and Shin replies that he will go to the sacred place to research. Suede says that he will also join him after he goes to Kilmont and returns, and Shin likes the idea of partying up with him again. Shin decides to leave with that, but then he suddenly recalls something. He summons a halberd that is Suede's personal weapon and returns it to him. The dragon is delighted to receive his weapon after all this time, and Shin tells him that he even took care of the maintenance. Suede notices that the halberd looks even more powerful now, and Shin explains that his mana control has improved lately, so he improved the halberd's power by 5 times. Suede is impressed by his master's growth, and everyone else is shocked. Later, Shin and the girls go to the Adventurers Guild. He plans to increase his rank to C, so he picks up a job to slay goblins. Quor is curious to see him in action, so she requests to tag along with him. She says that she has more work in the forest and Shin is curious about it. Quor tells him that she is going to investigate the forest in which he fought with Gerard to see if it is growing properly. Shin requests to let him join her on the investigation too, because he also wants to see it. After that, they go goblin hunting, and each one of them defeats 1 goblin each. Next, they check up the condition of the forest that has almost completely recovered from the damage it faced during Shin and Gerard's fight. Quor tells everyone that they have to examine the growth of trees and also gather any new herb they see in the area. Later, Shin returns to the guild to submit proof of completing his job, and the receptionist tells him that she also has a message for him. It is from Barlux, the guild master of the previous city, and Shin seems to remember him. The message tells him that he has been summoned to the royal palace immediately, and Tiara asks him if he has anything to do with a royal family. Shin doesn't think so, but then he recalls that he sent the giant sword of the skeleton monster flying on the first day that landed in the palace. He realizes that he must take care of this matter quickly, and Rai and Tiara are ready to join him. Quor says that she cannot leave the country, but Shin tells her to not stress about it. He then asks her when is her dad free, because he has something to give him. At night, Quor leads Shin to Wolf's room, where he gives him Gerard's gauntlets. Wolf is astonished to see them, because they were destroyed in the duel. Shin tells him that he created them in the first place, so he could easily repair them too. He adds that Gerard wanted them to be passed on to Wolf after his death, so he has already changed the owner settings of the gauntlets too. Wolf is taken aback by this last gift of his mentor, and Shin asks him to try the gauntlets. He wears them and feels the power overflowing. Shin then tells him that it is up to him to choose the heir to his gauntlets, and he agrees to this responsibility and fist bumps him. The next day, Shin and his gang leave the Beast Country. Once they reach the forest, Shin uses a crystal to teleport themselves back to the place where their shop was situated at first. Once they arrive at their destination, his minimap shows him that there are 3 hostile figures nearby watching him. Thankfully, he was using a stealth skill and the spies were not able to spot them. Rai says that they might just be concerned about the shop vanishing because they must have forgotten that it can move around. She suddenly gets sad as she asks Shin if he is also going to vanish someday again. She begins blushing after blurting that out, and starts walking towards the city, leaving Shin behind. He is left speechless at that, and Tiara asks what is bothering him. He replies that he is not sure what it is like to wait for someone who may never return, and wonders if he can do that. Tiara simply says that he cannot do it, because he is a human and their sense of time is much different than elves. She explains that for long-living races like them, losing their reason to live can turn their life into hell, and that is why they don't think too much about it and just do what they are supposed to do. She also tells Shin to stop getting serious at odd times, and he is flustered at her remark, but Rai agrees with Tiara, causing him to be even more embarrassed. After that, they reach the Adventurers Guild, where the receptionist's sister goes to fetch the guild master. Shin asks the receptionist why was he summoned, but she doesn't know anything about it. But she claims that Shin is not an ordinary adventurer. It was obvious that he would be summoned soon. The receptionist taunts him, saying that he always travels with beautiful women, and he nervously tries to tell her that he has some male friends too like Will, and they have even worked together in the past. That shocks everyone in the guild, and they become suspicious and wary of Shin. The receptionist asks him to confirm it once again, because Will is not the type of person to form parties, and there are many rumors about him because of his nature. Shin says that Will is easy to be misunderstood, and just then receptionist number 2 comes there to invite him to the guild master's office. The guild master greets Shin and then introduces him to the old magician named Arad, who appraises gems for the guild. He also examined the gem of the skeleton monster that Shin defeated. Shin then asks the guild master why did the palace summon him, but Arad has a question for him before that. He asks Shin if he knew that a huge white sword flew into the palace, more precisely into the bedroom of the second princess. The old magician says that it caused quite a stir, and now Shin is afraid because he didn't think that his mistake had such serious consequences. However, Arad tells him that no one was hurt in the incident. The problem is that the sword is made from really great materials, and it is easily as powerful as the kingdom's royal sword. Also, the skeleton warrior that Shin was quite powerful and high level, which was easy to tell from his gem. Shin can only nervously smile at this because he knows that he has been found out now. He asks the two men how did they conclude that it was him who was responsible for all this. Arad says that since the time of hunting the skeleton monster and the sword crashing into the palace was the same, he was called to appraise the sword too. He could find traces of magic on the sword that matched the gem of the defeated skeleton monster, and that linked the case to Shin. After that, the palace summoned him, and the guild couldn't refuse because the matter was quite high profile. The guild master then reveals that the second princess Ryoni is the one who personally summoned Shin because this incident piqued her interest in him. He is dumbfounded and thinks that the princess wants to punish him for his crimes, but the guild master says that the princess is a great warrior who has defeated skeleton monsters before, and she must just be curious about Shin's strength. However, neither the guild master nor Arad know her exact motives. Later, Shin tells everything to the girls, and Rai believes that the royal family will probably try to pressure him to serve them, or they will try to make him marry some important noble. He is taken aback to hear about marriage, but Rai calmly explains that royal families aggressively try to recruit strong people called the Chosen Ones. Shin doesn't want to go to the palace now, but Rai tells him that he can simply refuse to serve them by saying that he is already a member of an adventuring party. He agrees but thinks that refusing the offer to marry someone without a justifiable reason could lead to trouble. Rai blushes as she tells him that he can just say that he is engaged to her, and he likes the idea. The next day, Shin visits the royal palace and the guard leaves to fetch his superior to escort him inside. Soon, an elite knight named Gadras comes to escort Shin to Princess Ryoni. Shin reads that he is level 188 and thinks that he must be one of the strongest people in the country. Soon, they reach the room of Ryoni, who is eagerly waiting for Shin. She welcomes him and introduces herself, and then Shin does the same. Ryoni tells him that she doesn't like formality, so she asks him to call her by her name directly. He is already perplexed, and then asks the princess why was he summoned. The princess first takes out the large sword and shows it to Shin, who admits that the skeleton monster he defeated was wielding it. He tries mixing small lies with truths to ensure that his true strength is not revealed, but that is not enough. The princess believes that Shin is a chosen one because he suddenly distinguished himself, and she has called more people like him before. She says that some of them turned out to be assassins, but he seems safe going by her instinct. Shin is stupefied by how easygoing the princess is, but she tells him that she has the skill intuition and her hunches have never been wrong. Shin is not so sure about that. But then Gadras tells him that he has a letter of recommendation from Rai's shop, which was the biggest reason they trust that he is not an assassin. With that, Shin asks her to get down to business and Ryoni gets up to tell him the reason she called him here. Inside his heart, he wishes it to be about marriage, but turns out that the princess wants him to fight her, and Shin is astonished once again. Little do they know that while they are peacefully chatting, a dark and mysterious entity is roaming free in the palace, attacking unsuspecting servants. Gadras facepalms as he hears the princess challenging Shin to spar with her, and asks her to at least tell him to enter their service first. Ryoni tells him that it is important to judge his abilities before that. Gadras complains that this is not the ladylike way to do things, and Ryoni tells him that if he wants to serve a princess who acts like a girl, he should serve her sister instead. She then picks up the heavy suitcase and tells Shin that they should get going. First, Ryoni leads Shin to the teleportation room, so that they can go somewhere they don't have to hold back while fighting, and he can only nervously oblige. They teleport to some sort of coliseum, and Ryoni says that it was said to be built as a sparring ground for the Chosen Ones. No one knows what other purpose this place could serve. However, since this place was registered in the teleportation device, it must mean that this place was significantly important in the past. This forces Shin to think about how teleportation magic is considered lost in this world, but they still have the teleportation devices that lead them to fixed destinations. Ryoni says that they should start the duel now, and asks Shin to pick any weapon he likes. He chooses a normal sword, and she picks up a huge sword and swings it around with ease. The sparring session begins as Gadras gives the signal, and both Shin and Ryoni charge towards each other. Their swords release sparks as they clash, and then Ryoni pulls a surprise move by letting go of her sword and kicking MC. He dodges her kick, and both of them put some distance between them. Ryoni remarks that she was expecting him to be at least a little surprised by her move, and he replies that he was surprised. Next up, Shin adjusts his stats to be comparable to the princess and charges towards her. They clash swords in a contest of strength, but both of them are equally matched right now. They separate again, and Ryoni tells Shin that he doesn't need to hold back, and he can use his skills too. Shin takes up the offer and gets into stance to use the skill Flashing Vigor that enchants his sword and his entire body. To his surprise, Ryoni uses the same skill as well. Although with a different stance, they both rush at each other, and Ryoni strikes first. Her attack destroys the ground in its line, but Shin is able to dodge her somehow. He is impressed by the strength and skills of the princess, and she remarks that he is a great fighter too. She believes that they are fighters of similar level and similar fighting styles, and Shin remarks that this will make it pointless for them to duel any longer. He suggests to end the battle now, but Ryoni wants to keep fighting. However, Shin tells her that her sword won't last any longer. She takes one look at her battered sword, and sighs that it couldn't withstand her power. Gadras also steps up, saying that Shin's abilities are on par with the princess, and he has decent reaction time as well. He suggests that this is enough for his assessment, and Ryoni decides to agree with him this time. She declares that the duel is concluded now, and both Shin and Gadras are relieved. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure approaches the teleportation room in the palace. The guards warn him that the area is off limits and tell him to back off, but it doesn't seem like he will obey. In the sparring arena, Ryoni asks Shin if he will be interested in joining her team. He apologizes because he can't take up her offer because he prefers the free life of an adventurer. Ryoni is surprisingly understanding and asks him to tell her if he ever changes his mind. Shin then asks her why is she not using the rare sword from the skeleton monster, and Ryoni tells him that in their kingdom, it is a custom that a man must give a woman a sword when he proposes to her. Initially, the woman could use that sword to slice him down if he was ever cheating, but it is just formality nowadays. She then says that she considers this sword that crashed into her bedroom a gift from Shin, and he curiously asks her if this means he proposed to her. Shin is taken aback and tries to explain that it was just a mere coincidence, and Ryoni laughs it away, saying that she isn't considering it anything more than that. However, Gadras informs Shin that many people are plotting to use this incident to try him as a criminal, and then force him to work for the kingdom as a way to reduce his punishment. Shin realizes that this doesn't sound so far-fetched, but Ryoni has a solution for that. She says that they can present the sword as a tribute to her from Shin. This way, it won't be treated as a marriage proposal or a crime, and he will not have to worry about the political pressure that comes with either of these things. She offers to pay him handsomely for the sword and requests him to let her keep her, and Shin readily agrees. He doesn't even need money, and only asks permission to access the restricted zone of the library as his reward. Ryoni is shocked to hear this and insists that the sword is too precious, but Shin assures her that what he needs the most right now is information. The princess gladly accepts his deal, and they teleport back to the palace. There, Shin notices the knocked-out guards outside and then finds a priest in the corner of the room. Ryoni recognizes the priest and asks what is he doing here, but the priest keeps staring silently at her. Shin, however, can read his status and finds that he has been charmed by dark magic. As soon as Gadras learns about this, he tries to subdue the priest, but just then, the teleportation crystal activates by itself. Shin feels strangely nauseous as the crystal suddenly teleports them away, and he soon finds himself in some ruins. After taking some time to control the nausea, he goes to check up on Ryoni, who asks him what the hell just happened. Shin tells her that they seem to be teleported somewhere, and seeing the ruins around her, Ryoni recognizes the place as the Holy Land, Kalkia. There seems to be no one nearby, and Shin decides to get out of this place as fast as possible. He asks Ryoni if she can tell him about any nearby cities or towns so that he can ask his friends to meet them there, and she tells him that the city of Walmer is near. Before Shin can do anything, he is contacted by Rai, who felt him teleporting away, so she has been panicking all this time. He assures her that he is fine, and she tells him that he disappeared so fast that she thought he had vanished once again. After that, Shin tells her about the entire situation, and how a high-level priest was affected by the spells Charm and Confusion. Rai tells him that mind control spells are considered the ultimate taboo, and anyone found using them is executed without exemption. Shin believes that there is some mastermind hiding in the shadows. He can't use teleportation magic in front of the princess, so he asks Rai to handle things in the capital and meet up with him after that. With that, he ends the call and Rai finds Tiara waiting for some news. She is relieved when she hears that Shin is fine, but then Rai says that she has some urgent business and she needs her to come along. They head to the palace, where Rai tells Tiara that Shin has gotten in trouble and the cause behind it seems to be a demon. Both Tiara and Yusu freak out on hearing this. Rai explains that demons are born from the dark energy, and they are quite different from the regular monsters who are corrupted by that dark energy. The demons can disguise themselves as any monster, and they are also quite intelligent depending on how powerful they are. Rai believes that to use mind control magic, the demon must be at the rank of a count, and his level should be between 300 to 400. Tiara is nervous because she can't face such a strong enemy, but Rai assures her that this time they are only going to observe. Once they reach outside the palace, Rai uses a hiding magic on Tiara and herself. They turn invisible, and then Rai lifts Tiara and jumps over the palace wall. With that, she prepares to sneak inside the palace, but Tiara is already mentally exhausted. They walk in front of the guards who can neither hear nor see them, and reach the dungeons, where the demon has already been captured. Rai puts the guards there to sleep, and then uses the key to open the prison door. Inside the prison, the priest Grail is sitting silently. Rai greets him as she removes her hiding spell, and the priest is shocked to see her here. Rai says that she heard that the spells Charm and Confusion were cast on him, and the old priest rants about how he had no idea about that. He seems to be ridden with guilt about what he did while under the influence of the spells, but Rai assures him that the two people who were teleported away are safe, and they will return soon too. Grail is relieved to hear that, and Rai decides to lift the two mind control spells cast on him. Just then, some thorny tentacles come towards her. Rai quickly summons her sword and slashes them as the creepy demon with a dozen eyes on its face makes its appearance. She notices that the level 423 demon is a count-ranked named demon, which makes him quite powerful and intelligent. The demon also seems to know about Rai, who used to be a huge enemy of the demons 500 years ago. He shoots some thorns at her, and she easily deflects all of them. The demon then attacks her with his heavy claws, and Rai blocks them, giving the demon an opening to attack her with his vines. However, Rai summons a second sword to chop off the vines, making the demon scream in pain. He asks her why is she defending the human, and Rai replies that it would be a shame to let him die for someone else's crime. Also, letting a demon live would be a disgrace for their shop, the Moon Sanctum. The demon knows that name and about the high human who owned it and defeated countless demons in the past. However, he claims that it is all in the past now. He regenerates his wines, saying that all the heroes have left this world, and gradually, the age of humans is ending as corruption spreads everywhere. The demon tells Rai to join them because she was abandoned by her master, and those words rub her the wrong way. She dares the demon to repeat what he just said, and he does just that. He tells her that the high human she served won't ever return, and she should hate him because he abandoned her. Rai just sighs in front of his sheer ignorance, and tells him that he just said something he should not have. She makes her two swords vanish, and summons a third one. The demon recognizes it as the legendary weapon she used to wield in the past, and Rai slashes his head off clean before he can realize that the high human has returned. With that, Rai leads Tiara and Grail outside the prison, and all the guards on the way can only stare at her. Meanwhile, the king, his other daughter and Gadras are tense in the meeting room when Rai suddenly enters. The king is surprised to see her here, and she tells him that she has something important to tell him. She first tells them about the involvement of demons in the recent incident, sending everyone into worry. However, she quickly follows with good news about Shin and Ryoni being safe, and everyone is relieved. After that, Priest Grail apologizes to the king for everything that happened because of him, and the king says that it was not his fault, and he should continue working as usual. Next, he turns to Rai and asks what she plans to do next, and she replies that she has to go somewhere urgently before taking her leave. Outside, Tiara asks Rai how they will reach Walmer without their wagon, and she replies that they will simply run all the way. Tiara is confused about that, but within minutes, she finds out what Rai meant. On the other hand, Shin asks Ryoni about the Holy Land, and she tells him that Holy Lands are cities that fell 500 years ago during the dusk of prosperity. Though she has never entered one before, Ryoni has heard that many powerful monsters come out in the Holy Lands, and it takes multiple chosen ones to defeat them. Shin remarks that they need weapons, and Ryoni says that fortunately, she has the greatsword with her. However, she is worried that Shin has nothing to defend himself with. He tells her not to worry about him, but he still cannot let the princess know his true strength because then she will never let him leave. However, getting out of this holy land without using his true strength might not be possible. Ryoni then tells Shin that the Holy Land of Kalkia has 4 gates, and reinforcements will come from the south gate. She also knows about the control room next to the gate that opens it, thanks to the previous explorations sent to this place. Instead of finding their way, Shin decides to take shortcuts by jumping over the wall. However, he returns to the ground with the same speed he took off. Neither he nor Ryoni can understand it, so Shin tries once again, but the result is still the same. He asks the princess what did it look like to her, and she explains that he vanished just as he reached above the wall and then reappeared next to her. Shin wonders if this is teleportation magic, and to test his hypothesis, he jumps over the broken portion of the wall. Once again, he is returned to his position in a flash, and this helps him figure out the mechanism. He tells Ryoni to follow him, and takes her to a floating orb of light. She is confused, but Shin knows the floating orb well because it used to be a feature in the game. He reveals that if the floating orb is here, it means that this city is a dungeon, but Ryoni doesn't believe him because his words are against common sense. Shin explains that it is a different type of dungeon that allows people to only follow a particular route to get to the next floor or out of it, which is why he could not jump over the walls or through the hole, because the dungeon automatically corrected his position with its security features. Shin tells Ryoni that to escape this dungeon, they need to follow the floating orbs and defeat the monsters that come in their way. She thanks him and says that it is her great luck that she was teleported here with him. With that, Shin tells her that the orb will teleport them to the next location, and he wants to go ahead first and check if everything is clear. He touches the orb and gets teleported to the next location, and then returns within a few seconds to report that the next destination is completely safe. Ryoni apologizes for letting him do the dangerous task, and he says that he can't let a princess head into unknown places. Also, he can easily kill any monsters that come his way with his full power when he is not being watched. With that, they teleport to the next location, and Shin's radar alerts him about a monster nearby. He informs Ryoni about it, and they cautiously head towards its location. They find that it is a creepy ghost-type monster that gives off a terrifying aura. Shin knows that the monster can use earth and wind-type magic, and he also finds that it is at level 531. The monster immediately attacks them with a powerful wind spell, and Ryoni gets ready to face it. However, Shin stops her and says that he will deal with the storm, while she should focus on the monster itself. Ryoni agrees, and then Shin summons his sword. He sends a flying slash that disperses the storm, and at the same time, the princess leaps high and delivers a powerful blow to the ghost-type monster. Shin follows after her, and deals the finishing blow himself. Ryoni remarks that it seemed quite easy, and he explains that the sword she has is enchanted with light magic, which is strong against ghost-type monsters. She then asks him about his sword, and he tells her that it is a mid-level mythic item, claiming that it is one of his trump cards, but that is just a white lie. Ryoni suddenly gets uncomfortably close to him, claiming that she is very interested in him now. Shin can only nervously back away from her. They resume their journey and Shin can spot various monsters around them. However, he assures the princess that the monsters in a dungeon don't leave their position normally, so they can deal with them one-on-one. While he appears calm on the outside, he is actually quite fidgety inside, because he wants to flex his power and take care of the monsters in an instant. They come across another floating orb, and it teleports them ahead. There, they come face to face with a level 684 slime monster. Shin remarks that it is a troublesome opponent, but Ryoni thinks that he is just mansplaining, because how dangerous can a slime really be? She charges at it despite Shin's warning, but her attack doesn't do any damage to the slime. Instead, it sprouts some tentacles that grab her and melt everything they touch. Shin attacks the slime with a sand-type attack, destroying its tentacles and freeing Ryoni. She thanks him for saving her, and then asks why did her attack not work earlier. He explains how physical and weak attacks are useless against slimes, and tells her that they should finish the monster right here, or it will chase after them. Shin rushes at the giant slime monster and uses a fire attack on it. The attack causes the slime's body to evaporate and exposes its core, that Ryoni slashes in one hit. They defeat the slime monster with that, and Shin tells her that she did a great job. Ryoni tells him that he did better, and then remarks that he seems to be getting too frank with her lately. He apologizes for it, but she tells him that she doesn't mind it, and she doesn't want either of them to hold back. She also notices that he has been facing away from her, and he coyly tells her that he can see some things if he turns towards her. Ryoni finally notices that her clothes have been strategically melted by the slime for maximum fan service within community guidelines and freaks out. Luckily, Shin has some spare clothes with him, and he gives them to Ryoni. She is starting to get suspicious of him having too many useful items now, but he just tells her that he likes to be prepared. They resume their journey and Shin asks Ryoni if she knows any magic attacks. She tells him that she knows some beginner-level spells, but they won't be helpful here. Shin gets an idea, but he decides to contact Rai, who is rushing towards him, and confirm things first. He asks her if he can teach the imitation enchantment technique to the princess, and she agrees with him only because it is an emergency situation. Shin then teaches Ryoni about the imitation enchantment technique, which is not as powerful as the real deal, but good enough for now. He asks her to create a small fireball and enchant the sword with it. The sword absorbs the power of the fireball, and Shin throws a stone at her to try it. Ryoni manages to cut through the stone and partially melt its interior. With that, they reach the exit of the dungeon, but Shin suddenly feels like something was sucking him in. Ryoni couldn't feel anything like that, and Shin begins to wonder what is happening. However, he can't afford time to investigate it, so he decides to head to the exit of the Holy Land, which is blocked by a giant monster egg. The monster egg hatches, and Shin gets a bad feeling about it. The monster that comes out of it is a white griffin with the powers of ice. Shin notices it preparing an attack, so he grabs Ryoni and jumps away before the griffin's ice beam freezes the area. It keeps shooting the ice beam at them, but Shin manages to come to a safe area, where the embarrassed Ryoni asks him to put her down. She asks him the plan, and he says that he will distract the griffin from the front and she can take it down from behind. He assures her that he will be fine, and Ryoni trusts him. She runs behind the griffin, and Shin begins to lure it into an open area. He tries to keep the full attention of the griffin on him while dodging its ice beams. He takes out some daggers and flings them in a random direction, but they home in on the ice chicken and hit its eye. Using that chance, Ryoni launches a powerful attack on it, but the griffin counterattacks and sends her flying with a slap from its wings. She somehow manages to land on her feet, but her attack opened up the chance for Shin to finish the monster. He hits it point blank with a powerful fire spell, defeating it instantly. Shin thinks that they can leave the dungeon now, but then suddenly, the ice griffin heals itself completely. Both Shin and Ryoni are stunned because the monster seems to have completely regenerated from its injuries. It begins attacking them again, and they can only run. Ryoni asks how to defeat the monster, and Shin tells her a somewhat risky plan. He asks her to examine the mechanism to unlock the gate by herself while he deals with the monster alone. However, there is a deeper reason behind this plan. Shin believes that the griffin is a monster created by magic, and there must be a spell that is helping it regenerate. He wants Ryoni to look for that spell in the opening mechanism room, which is the most likely place to find it. She agrees to his plan, but asks will he be fine dealing with the griffin alone. He tells her that he will be fine because it is not his first time fighting monsters like this. With that, they go their separate ways. Once Shin reaches the griffin, he unleashes his full power and takes off its head with just one slash. However, the monster regenerates instantly again. Shin decides to use it as a test subject to try out how much power can he safely release now. Meanwhile, Ryoni finds the door to the opening mechanism. Shin keeps beating the griffin again and again, and it keeps returning to life each time. Suddenly, something changes about it, and a white sphere begins shining near its throat. The sphere begins sucking Shin towards it, and he realizes it is the same thing he felt earlier. He attacks the sphere, but it just absorbs its attack. Shin decides to let the sphere take him in to find out its true nature, but then he suddenly finds himself covered in a golden light, and the sphere stops pulling him in. He decides to attack the griffin, and chops off its wing that doesn't regenerate. Shin realizes that for some reason, the griffin won't regenerate now. He dodges its ice beam and then uses a fire slash on its neck, killing it for good. Just then, Ryoni comes running towards him, and Shin tells her that he managed to obliterate the monster without a trace. She has also opened the gates, and they escape the dungeon. Shin informs her that his companions will meet him in the city of Walmer, and Ryoni tells him that they need to cross the mountain range for that. On the other hand, Rai and others are taking a break near a stream, and Shin informs her that he has safely left the dungeon. She is happy about that, but her mood suddenly turns sour as she learns that Shin has to camp with the princess all night. She cancels the rest break and heads towards the other side of the mountain at full speed. Meanwhile, Shin and Ryoni are sitting in front of their tent, and he even brings forth a thermos and some cups to drink tea. Ryoni seems to be impressed by this, and she scoots closer to Shin, trying to charm him so that he can join their kingdom. He refuses her advances, and she keeps teasing him until she can hold it no more, and starts laughing. She says that Shin doesn't even try to act polite with her, but she actually likes it. As a noble, she is used to everyone treating her with respect and flattery, so she likes talking to frank people like Shin. She starts clinging and snuggling with him, and he can't tell her to get off. The night passes like this, but early in the morning the next day, Shin suddenly notices something that makes him alert. Ryoni also comes out of her tent, and they see a huge horde of skeleton monsters heading towards Walmer. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for part 12. And make sure to check out this brand new anime about a loser who gets reincarnated as a prince with godly abilities.